Hey guys, welcome back to the garage. Today we've got a special treat. We're gonna be doing a starter on Bill, which is the legend behind the camera. Our cameraman is giving this Honda to his son for his 16th birthday. So the issue that we have is it doesn't start. So we're pretty sure it's a starter, but we're gonna go through, show you how to verify that, and we're also gonna show you how to do the starter replacement on this Honda Crosstour with a 2.4 liter 4-cylinder engine. So. One of the challenges in doing the starter on this 2.4 liter engine is the starter actually lives back here behind this manifold. So the manifold, to get to the starter, the intake manifold is going to have to come off. So we're going to go ahead and pull our snorkel, and there's a couple bolts up underneath that we'll show you guys that you're going to have to remove to get to this. And once we can actually access the starter wiring, we'll show you how to verify that before you actually put the starter in and find out it doesn't work. Working with Jacob Staggerwald is better than having Vanna White.
Vanna White.
First thing we did was take the splash shield down. There's this mount right here, okay? All right, so right up there, you'll see two nuts on some studs that come down. That's on the bottom side of that intake manifold, and then that comes back to the engine. So the easiest way to do this is to go ahead to get up underneath the vehicle, make sure if you're doing this in your driveway or whatever, you're not resting this on the hydraulics of a jack. Make sure that you're using jack stands, but get it up in the air, get the splash shield out of the way, and you can get to those nuts a lot easier from the bottom side than you can from the top side. Now, with that said, I would make sure that you loosen this bracket as well, because when we go to put this intake back on, it'll be a lot easier to get the intake manifold fitted. We're just going to go ahead and take this bracket off. That way I can show you guys a little bit better exactly what I was talking about. And again, it will make refitting the intake manifold a little bit easier. This bolt here goes straight into the cylinder block, okay? And then these two holes, you'll see the studs when we pull this manifold out of the way. The two studs in the top come down into these holes, and then you've got the nuts that go up underneath of that. So this is the bracket that you're going to need to remove off of the bottom of the manifold to get that out. All right guys, let me show you what we've got so far. So we've got the bracket off from underneath of the manifold. Okay, this harness is going to need to be removed, or not necessarily removed, but moved out of the way. So there's a small bracket here, which is this metal bracket, okay? It's got a small 10mm bolt. Okay, we removed the 10mm bolt. That harness sits there like that. That's now out of the way. There's this small connector here, okay? And then we can also slide this injector harness up. Flip that up. That gives us plenty of room to go ahead and get our manifold off. This hose, these two here will need to come off as well. So we'll grab those. Okay. Now those hoses are out of the way. We basically have everything disconnected and or out of the way. Now we can get to our bolts. So as you can see, we've got bolt here on the corner. bolt here, 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 and then there's also one down here just below the throttle body. Make sure that you get all those bolts off before you try to force the manifold to come off. If this air box is removed, which requires you taking the battery out, but if this air box was removed, you can get to that pretty easy, especially if you don't have a U-joint. If you have a U-joint, you can always get this one out by hand. I was trying to do it with the power tools, but sometimes it just doesn't work. You got to revert to hand tools. Okay. That's all right. So instead of taking, as you can see, there's another hose over here, okay? Instead of pulling that off, all we need to do is be able to get to the starter. So we're just gonna set our manifold right there without damaging that hose. And then our starter is right there. We can actually now see it, okay? Now, what we're gonna need to do to properly diagnose this is we're gonna try to start it, and there should be power going to this wire, okay? This is the main battery feed, which is still live right now, okay? It's the main battery feed, so that's your wire coming directly from the battery to the starter. And then this is your solenoid wire. This is what engages the bendix of the starter, makes the starter spin over. So what we want to see when we turn the ignition is we should be getting 12 volts to this solenoid wire. If we're not, then we have a problem other than the starter itself. If we do have 12 volts going here, then the starter is the culprit. So let's check it out.
So I'm taking the ground from my multimeter. We'll go straight to the battery. First, I'm just going to check out the battery. 12.3 volts. And while we're here, just to see, I'm going to check voltage. I'm checking the main power. So this is the main cable going from the battery to the starter, the big fat cable. We got 12.3 volts there. And now when Lee turns the key, we should see battery voltage here. Got
good.
Yep, got 11.6 volts. Do it again. Yep, got 11.4. There's a little bit of a voltage drop there.
That could be the lights and the fact that this battery's dead too.
Yeah. So we are getting battery voltage to our solenoid wire, so that means starter needs to come out.
So there's also this harness here. So now that we've decided that the starter itself definitely has to come out, you just slide this tab over, and it has these harness connectors just like this. Okay, they have these little tabs on them. That's the lock tab. You don't have to force it. Just takes a little bit. If you force it too much, you'll break the retaining tab. Just slide it out of the way, and then that harness will slide right off. Okay. Our starter is out. We're gonna put our core back in the box so that Mr. William, the man, the myth, the legend, cameraman, can return that to the parts store.
You want this bracket?
What's that?
You want this bracket?
Yeah, I guess we should put all the parts and pieces in there. something I like.
Where can you pick up that light, Jacobs?
sbtoolsusa.com.
All right, guys, so we've got our starter in. Everything's connected back up. We're gonna temporarily just make connection with our negative cable. Obviously, anytime you're messing with the starter, alternator, anything electrical, you're gonna wanna disconnect the negative cable on the battery, okay? So we're gonna temporarily hook this back up. We just wanna make sure, even though we diagnosed it as a bad starter, this is a remanufactured starter. New means new, new don't mean good, and remanufactured means previously failed. So we're gonna make sure that the starter actually works before we go through the work and the hassle of putting all this back together to find out it doesn't work. All right, Jacob, go ahead. Yep, so you can hear that. We've got starter engagement. I'll go ahead and pull that cable back off. We'll get all this put back together. Something else of note, you'll notice that Bill, on his way to the garage this morning, stopped and picked up an intake gasket set for this. We weren't sure what the condition of the rubber seals for the intake were gonna be in, so I had him go ahead and pick that up. The last thing that you wanna do is start this job and find out that you've gotta stop what you're doing and go get a new part. It's a lot easier just to take it back to the parts store and return it if you don't need it. This rubber is in good condition. We're gonna reuse these intake seals and save Bill a few dollars. So, but again, stop and get your parts first, because if you're removing the intake, there's a good possibility you may need to replace the seals. If you're not on a budget, certainly doesn't hurt to go ahead and put new seals in. Now what Jacob did was take a little bit of brake clean, put it on a rag, clean up the gasket surface. We don't necessarily need to spray a bunch of brake clean or any other chemicals in here. That'll give us a little bit of cleaner to get in there and make sure that we've got a clean mating surface to get this intake resealed. All right, something else to point out, something else that's worth noting, as Jacob would say. The rubber seals have little tabs that come through the top of the manifold. So making sure that you're keeping those gaskets in place, make sure that they didn't slide, fall, or anything else. As long as you can see your square tabs of that rubber seal in its location, you know that those seals are intact. All good, sir?
Yep.
All right. If you're using hand tools, that's fine. Not everybody has the power tools.
Need torque speed?
We will. But something that's really important, even if you're using power tools, is to make sure that you get these bolts and these nuts started by hand. If not, and you get them cross-threaded in this aluminum, it's going to be a very costly mistake, and it's pretty easy to do. So you want to go 3, 4, 5, 6 turns by hand just to make sure that these things are starting properly. There's going to be some torque specs needed for this. You're going to want to look those up. If you're doing this at the house, you know, obviously if you're doing this in a shop, first of all, you're probably not watching this video. But more importantly, you probably have access to R&R procedures, torque specs, all that kind of stuff. If you're doing this at home, which more than likely, if you're watching this video, you're doing this on your own vehicle or a friend's vehicle, make sure that you get the torque specs, torque the manifold down properly. Yes, you could probably get away with just torquing them down to what you think is good, but there is a torque spec. There's a torque spec for a reason. Make sure that you use it. The people at the parts store, whether you're dealing with Napa or Advance, O'Reilly's, whoever it is, wherever you're getting your parts, they all have access to that technical data and will be glad to give you those torque specs. Also, a lot of the parts, like for example, Felpro, you could probably go to their website and get torque specs. There may even be torque specs inside the gasket set that came with your parts. So one way or the other, get the torque specs, reach out to somebody, and do the job right.
Heat, we're 16 foot-pounds. This Doesn't show a torque sequence.
Okay. So here's our torque specs. Okay. It's 22 Newton meters or 16 foot-pounds. Okay. They're not showing a torque sequence. So the way that I'm gonna do this is I'm gonna come in to the center bolt and I'm gonna work my way out, down, down. Okay. Some people will ask why I have the battery sitting in the case. And the reason is torque wrench isn't something that you use all the time. It is an expensive, especially a digital torque wrench is an expensive tool, big investment. Batteries have a tendency to leak. So if you leave them in there, they can leak out. When that happens, that destroys the electronics. So it only takes a half a second to pull the cap off, leave the batteries out, okay? So we're gonna come on, let it calibrate. Now that we're calibrated, we're on 30 foot-pounds. We're gonna change this to inch-pounds, foot-pounds, kg, Newton meters. And it was 22. Oop. All right, 22 with no angle. I'm gonna torque these. Go ahead and put this on. There are 2 locating tabs for your snorkel, okay, or your air cleaner boot, whatever you want to call it. There's 2 locator tabs. Make sure you put it back where it goes. Don't be a dummy. We'll deal with that in a second. All right, let's see if she starts. Yep. All right, guys, she starts and runs. That is the proper way to do a starter on a 2.4 liter Honda engine. This Crosstour is a 2012 model, but this same 2.4 IV Tech we found in the Civics, can be found in the Accords.
Probably pilots too.
Yeah, pretty much anything that Honda makes, they more than likely they have dumped this engine in it at some point in time. So not that difficult. Take your time. If you need to, feel free to reach out to us. What's the tech support number there, Jacob?
855-839-2626.
Yeah, just any questions, concerns. If you have any questions about the tools that we've used, check us out on sptoolsusa.com, CEASusa.com, or again, just reach out to the guys in customer service or tech support, 855-839-2626. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you again soon in the Cutting Edge Garage.